Hi everyone, thank you very much for tuning in to our monthly economic update for the month of November 2024, brought to you by our platform Economy.lk through the Economic Intelligence Unit. Before I start my update, I just want to let everyone know. So the Economic Intelligence Unit does corporate presentations to clients based on their requirements. So this kind of presentation is more elaborated upon based on your requirement, and that is what you see on this particular picture that is posted now on video. We have this put up on our social media. Please go through it, and if you have any corporate requirements, please reach out to us. So getting back to our economic update, the most important being the monetary policy stance of the central bank. They changed from a dual policy rate to a single policy rate, and that is what I'm talking to you about in this particular slide that you see here. So the central bank introduced overnight policy rate, which is now set at 8%, targeting the average weighted call money rate. So the average weighted call money rate was at hovering around 8.5%. So if you consider 8% overnight policy rate, it would be a 50 basis point reduction. But if you consider the standard lending and standard deposit facility rates, which were at 8.25 and 9.25, now they have gone down to 7.5 and 8.5%, which accounts for a 75 basis point reduction. But what you have to keep in mind is that the policy rate now is the overnight policy rate. It's at 8%, which is a 50 basis point reduction. And moving on, what you see here in this particular slide is, so the board had arrived at easing monetary policy based on deflation, based on further space for lending rates to come down, based on the strong external front. And what you see in the graph is, and what the governor also alluded to in the monetary policy review to the media, was that the inflation and headline inflation specifically will remain in the negative territory till about Q2 of 2025, and it will slowly start picking up, because core inflation, when you leave aside all your supply side factors, the demand side inflation is at hovering around 3 to 4%. And with monetary policy rates coming down, what you see here in this particular graph is all the market rates are also coming down. And you see yesterday, 27 November Treasury bill auction, rates also coming down for 91-day, 182-day, 364-day bills, all coming down by about 60 basis points. And importantly, we also saw the IMF's third review getting staff level agreement. The board level agreement is conditioned upon the 2025 budget alignment. And that is what you see here in this particular slide. And moving on to the next particular slide, what you see is the launch of the ISB, the International Sovereign Bond Exchange, following the cabinet approval. And with monetary policy rates coming down, things easing up, what you see is the credit to the private sector also growing. So for the year, from Jan to October, about 504 billion rupees have flown in as private credit. But what is interesting to see here in this particular graph over here to your left-hand side is that consistently from May to October, there has been an expansion in private credit. And where is this private credit heading towards? And that is what you see here to your right-hand side of the graph, is mainly to the services sector, followed by the agriculture and fishing sector. And moving on to worker remittances and tourism. Worker remittances have been consistently performing well compared to 2022 and 2023. And interestingly, since March of 2024, worker remittances have been hovering above the $500 million mark, which will go much higher in November and December as anticipated. And also on tourism, what you see here in this particular slide to your left-hand side, we have 1.77 million tourists coming in from Jan to November 24th. Tourism also has picked up. Tourist arrivals, tourism earnings are doing well. But what I want to allude to is something interesting here, the distribution of rooms by provinces and by districts. And that is what you see here in this particular graph. Interestingly, it's very much concentrated to the western and southern and somewhat to the central provinces and districts. But with the president's manifesto, which focuses on the northern province, it's interesting to see how developments will take place going forward. And also I thought of talking about airlines, since Sri Lankan Airlines has also been a topic of conversation. What you see here in this particular graph is 25% of our passengers that come into Sri Lanka uses Sri Lankan Airlines. So that's an interesting aspect and interesting to see. It's followed by Qatar Airways, Emirates, but Sri Lankan Airlines is at around 24.8 or close to 25% of our passengers use Sri Lankan Airlines. On the central bank front, on exchange rates. So the central bank has purchased $2.47 billion for the year 2024 and only released about sold about $160 million. And that is what you see here in this particular graph. The blue lines are the purchases by the central bank from the market, and the ones in orange are the sales. So you see here, there's a high peak in March and April, amounting to about 1.1 billion. In totality, it's about approximately $2.5 billion has been purchased by the central bank. Why is that? Because they have a particular target to achieve. Right now, the foreign reserves are at around $6.5 billion, including the public swap with China, PBOC swap that we have with China, amounting to about $1.5 billion. Now, what you see here in this particular graph is very interesting. This is additional revenue measures on the fiscal front that the government is looking at, and what the IMF has also reported. Now, car imports are banned, but the government is looking at a phased approach to opening up car imports. And if you have a fully opened car import market, they're looking at improving the revenue side, the tax revenue, by about 0.8% of GDP. So for the year 2024, I think the target is about 13.5% tax revenue to GDP. It will be around 13.8% tax revenue to GDP as per the Secretary of Treasury's statements before. But we have to achieve 15% by 2025. So 0.8% will potentially come from this lifting of import bans of vehicles. Now, interestingly, we move to the global side of things. On the US election, President-elect Donald Trump has said that he wants to impose 20% tariffs on all foreign goods and 60% tariffs on Chinese goods coming into the US. He recently this week on his social media, Truth Social, also mentioned that on his first day, he's going to impose 10% additional tariffs on Chinese goods and 25% tariffs on goods coming in from Mexico and Canada. And as you see to your right-hand side on this particular side, now this does not need congressional approval. It's just an executive order. Interesting developments that our trade sector also has to consider. Why? Because what you see here in this particular graph is average tariffs on the goods exported to US, wearing apparel at around 12%, rubber and plastics at 2.5%. Now, imagine if the president-elect imposes a 10 or 15% tariff on all goods imported into the US. This would have a major impact on our exports to the US, because it accounts for about $2.7 billion of our exports go to the US. Similar case with EU, we have the EU GSP+. We have to be careful because we have to maintain the GSP+. What you see here in this particular graph is, if the GSP+ is cancelled, we go back to most favored nations tariffs, and that is much higher compared to the GSP+. So that's on the global front. I hope you found this video insightful. Do reach out to us. Thank you very much for watching, and looking forward to seeing you in our next monthly economic update. Thank you very much.